All right, hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-hosts, Maddie B. and Rick David. And I'm going to kick off high tempo this week by bringing up John Gruden to Tennessee. He still hasn't shot the job down. I know after the show last week, Rick and me made a little wager on him being hired. I said he's probably going to be hired by Tennessee. He hasn't said no. Rick, I'm just going to put it out there. I know you want, we'll do like a dinner thing is what we're going to end up doing. But right now I'm looking at the groomers and there's all kind of things flying. And where there's smoke, there's usually fire. And he hasn't said no. Remember whenever I joked about Franklin for Penn State, he came out and he was like, right now I love it at Penn State. He didn't say no either. And now that Texas A&M job is looking like it's going to be open, they're saying that someone's going to be fired no matter what. After their game this week, I think they play LSU. So don't worry. Tennessee's going to make that splash hire. They're going to get Gruden. He actually went on a radio station. I have some details here. He went on a radio station last week, and for no reason, he brought up Rocky Top and said that was a great fight song. Just out of the blue. And then they asked him about the job, and his quote was, "Never say never to nothing." Sounds like a Tennessee quote right there. So, Rick, you have any thoughts on that? John Gruden to Tennessee?
I've been reading some rumors saying that the Tampa Bay job is going to be available. So the Buccaneers job is going to be available. It looks like if they don't make the playoffs, well, here's the thing. Looks like another Ryan Fitzpatrick week. So Winston's not playing. And Winston's facing allegations, which seems to be the new reoccurring theme, that our Hollywood actors, our politicians, and some of our sport athletes are all getting accusations. So Winston's facing them, so he may get a suspension out of this. So who knows? If I'm John Gruden here, I'm looking at the big picture. What all jobs are going to open, and what job looks like I can build this and make it a champion in a quick amount of time. He's getting older. Let's do it quick. And I'm looking at the Tampa Bay job. That may be one where you can turn it around real quick. If you get the solid running back, you have some good players around you. You know, O.J. Howard's finally starting to play like a pretty good player. So if you get a couple defensive guys, you could be in this. I mean, especially in that division. So, I mean, I don't think they're far off. Tampa Bay, maybe one or two free agents, one or two good draft picks pan out. So, I mean, Tennessee looks like more of a build than what would Tampa Bay be. So,
well, Rick, I'm going to stop you right there. You're making a lot of good points, but you're forgetting Tennessee recruits have 5-star hearts. And he's been recruiting Butch Jones. He got the 5-star hearts right there, ready to take them. They're already life champions. So it's not that hard to turn that team around and make them a contender. Plus, his wife was a cheerleader there. And so she has experience cheering from the stands, so that's one more cheer that you're going to get whenever he's coach on the sidelines. So I'm going right out. I'm going to say it. Tampa Bay.
Oh, my God.
Tampa Bay already fired him once. Why would you go somewhere that already slaps you out the door? When you can go to Tennessee, life champions, 5-star hearts, that's a winning formula. Any final thoughts on that?
His wife's a cheerleader. That's awesome. I got to give it to you there. But I'm going to say this. New Orleans was the bottom feeder, 2 years ago? They're now 8-2. Tampa Bay is 4-6. They can make the change. I'm still saying, look, Texas A&M jobs probably going to come open. There's probably going to be some other jobs open. What if James Franklin gets offered way too much money? I don't think he's leaving. I think Penn State's going to counter, and then he'll get some more money. UCLA jobs open, Yeah,
UCLA was surprising to me because I didn't even know they were going to. I knew they talked about firing Mora for a couple years now, but it kind of seemed like he was kind of set for life. Like, I just didn't see them fire him, especially in the middle of the year, because they had a pretty decent season. I mean, how many wins do they expect? I mean, they had the top recruiting classes, so maybe they were expecting a little bit more. So I don't know about that, but you have anything for high tempo this week, Rick? And then we'll let you talk, Matt.
Mine actually goes into Pitt basketball. What the heck is happening here? Stallings is not the answer as a coach. I'll be surprised if he makes it through the whole entire season. Right now in their season, they have lost to Montana, Penn State, and Oklahoma State. You're 1-4. This used to be the Oakland Zoo, hard ticket to get. You're paying crazy prices. And nowadays, you could just walk right up, get a ticket. You're not getting the recruits. You used to be able. New York City was Pitt home, where nobody else was touching New York City, because Pitt had like a lockdown on it. With their old coaches of, Jamie Dixon being one of them. They could, everybody was going from New York City to Pitt. Now it's like you got nothing. And I know Stallings complained last year he didn't have a big man and a shooter. I think you're about 3 shooters away and a big man if you're losing to Montana and Penn State. So where the heck have you gone? And I also want to say this also proves something to the Pittsburgh homers out there. You don't support a team when they're terrible, but yet you'll come when they're doing great and pay top dollar. Disappointing. So support your team. Maybe show up to a game. Maybe you'll get some recruits. Maybe you'll have some money in your endowment.
Yeah, and I want to expand on that because I think we brought this up when Jeff was on the show, or maybe it wasn't on this show, but Pitt went all in when they were in the Big East in like 1999 when they moved their football stadium. They demolished it or whatever they did and started to play at Heinz Field, and they invested in the Peterson Center. And they were going all for basketball. When the Big East fell apart, they have really been hurt for the past couple of years whenever they joined the ACC. I think when you said about the New York recruiting and stuff, they don't really get any exposure there. The only team they play in that area is Syracuse, and that's not even in the same area. People assume that Syracuse is in New York. It's near the city. It's not. And when they were in the Big East, they were going to see Rutgers. And, I mean, even UConn was kind of close, but you were there near the city. Now they're not playing those games anymore. You play Syracuse, and most of their schedule is down south. So I thought it would take a toll, and you could see the Big Ten. That was their reason why they added Rutgers, is they wanted that New Jersey and that New York recruiting base. So it'll be interesting to see if Penn State always recruited that area for football. Are they going to be able to now take those recruits that Pitt was getting just because Rutgers is now in there and they can say, hey, we're going to be playing close to you. We now have Maryland that's closer, and we have Rutgers that's closer in our league. Come play for Penn State. Why would you play for Pitt whenever you're only going to be playing like 5 hours away from New York City instead of like 1 or 2? I mean, maybe Boston College. I don't know how far away, but that's certainly not as close as what Rutgers would be. So just something to think about, because Penn State now has an opportunity to take over that market that Pitt was pretty much owning before Dixon. I think Dixon saw it whenever he ran to TCU, because he left the Pitt job around that same time and jumped ship. People were thinking that Pitt might be left behind before they joined the ACC, and he jumped ship sometime around there. I could be wrong on my timeline, but it's going to be interesting to see over the next 5 years which one of those teams is going to have, and it's affecting all sports. Like a lot of Pitt's other sports have fallen off the map too, and Penn State is still doing strong. So even in state, when you have rivalry, and this is kind of a tease for later, we have rivalry week to end out the show here, but we'll be getting back into that because I'm going to be talking about the Penn State thing here in a little bit. But I'll let you go, Matt. Anything for High Tempo this week?
Well, just kind of piggybacking off of the whole Pitt thing, when Jamie Dixon left, it kind of left Pitt in a bind, because who were the coaches that would have been able to come and have a quality impact at Pitt? I don't see with college basketball where there's the big name coaches that can come in and help turn on, and not that a Krzyzewski or any of those kind of guys are going to want to leave their programs to go to Pitt, but who would be an up-and-coming coach that would go to Pitt? I mean, I don't think that they were in bad shape when Dixon left. I think the impression was Dixon was good enough for regular season average teams, but the knock on him was he would get to the tournament, he would qualify, and then he would get bounced in the first round of the tournament. And people thought that he should have been able to do more, and that the sloppy play once the tournament hit was hurting him, that there really wasn't as much of a fight to let him go. But then the argument was he leaves, and now what are you left with? So you end up having to get a coach like Stallings, who had a questionable past that had boom or bust potential. And as of right now, he's proving more to be bust than boom. But all it's going to take is for him to be able to pick up a couple recruits. And it was touted when he was hired to be, a quality recruiter. And because of his ability to recruit in the Maryland area, it's to be seen whether he's able to do that or not, or to give him time to have his recruits come through the program and see where they're going to stand. But as of now, it doesn't look like he's getting the players or developing them to make them a substantial team going forward.
Yeah, and just to add in, for people that forget, the college basketball is under investigation as a whole from the FBI for recruiting practices. So that's something, too, that could come around where you get a new coach. They might not be into that basketball shoe circuit like Dixon could have been, getting recruits steered towards him. I don't think he was named, but it's supposedly going much deeper than what it is. And then you get a new coach. It's harder. You lose some of those AAU contacts. Basketball is a harder sport to recruit for without that extra help. So that's another thing that might swing things here in the next 5 to 10 years. But before we get into our first topic, I wanted to start giving a little recap on Pittsburgh teams, since we are Pittsburgh based. The Steelers right now are 8-2. I don't have a name for this segment yet. 8-2 in the AFC North, in first place. They're actually first overall in the AFC, I believe. That will be settled because they're going to end up playing the Patriots, who they're tied with. But they're in good shape, and they look good on Thursday, and we're going to be getting to them in a second. And for the NHL, the Pittsburgh Penguins, they still have the awful goal differential. Right now, they're negative 16. 11 wins, 8 losses. They're third in the Metropolitan Division. And their last 10, 4-4. So an even split with 2 overtime games. So I don't. It's still early. It's hard to tell. Right now, they're looking like they're going to sneak into the playoffs and hoping that their championship pedigree is going to let them turn it on. I think that even in basketball, you're seeing that with the Cleveland Cavaliers right now. So it's still early. Nothing on that, but that's our check-in on the Pittsburgh teams. Coming up with the name for that segment down the line. But we're probably going to end up throwing it in there after high tempo each week. And Pirates, I didn't hear anything. Rick, do you have anything on the Pirates to add for anything they're doing? I saw they might be involved in some trades, but nothing substantial that I've seen.
Gifting Gopay finally got traded. He was, with the organization 8 years. They have depth at shortstop crazy. They have Cole Tucker in AA, Kevin Newman in AAA. He was a bench player in AAA. He was there, like I said, 8 years. He was the first player ever from South Africa to play in the major leagues, but they traded him to Toronto for a player to be named later. It was either going to add him or he went to the Rule 5 draft, so get rid of him while you can. They added some guys, like Austin Meadows, the 40-man roster, which a lot of teams did, adding their top prospects to it just because of the Rule 5 draft, and they had to add the guys on. So nothing much. The Neil Walker rumor is a rumor. I think it's something Pitt Nation wants, the Homers want. They want that Neil Walker back to try to sell tickets. I don't see him coming back. It makes sense. They need some versatility. He can be a left-hand back. But I think he's going to get a better deal somewhere else. Oakland could be a spot. He could go back to Milwaukee to be a spot. I mean, there's a lot of different ones. He could even go to a place like Texas. They need some help at first base, and he could be a DH there. So, I mean, there's a lot more spots that have a lot more money than what the Pirates do and going to spend. So, that's about it.
Yeah, and that Neil Walker thing, that ship has sailed. We had the stats on that over the summer whenever we were looking at the Pirates right before trade deadline. And their whole downward trend started whenever they got rid of him after the playoff run. So that was the time to keep him. Bringing him back whenever he's older, not as effective, isn't going to be a help for the Pirates. It's just going to be more of a nostalgic thing. Hey, look who we brought back. Maybe we'll sell some tickets. That's not going to win games or get into the playoffs. I'm sorry.
Now, and remember, the Pirates' deal is up this year for their media deal. So they're going to do whatever. So, I mean, I know I said earlier McCutcheon's probably getting traded. I think they're going to keep him. There's 2 indications. The media deal, about their TV contract. And I just saw their promotion schedule. They have a promotion for him in June. So I bet he's a trade deadline guy. So I'll take back that where I said he's going to San Francisco. I bet he's going to get traded somewhere and look for a contender to take him. And then you don't get a good return like you did if you would trade him here at the winter meeting.
That's a good point, because if they do trade him late, they're not going to get anything for him. And it's a typical Pittsburgh move. You use them to sell tickets, get your new media deal, and then you cut him for nothing. So at that point, you're better off just signing him for a lifetime Pirates contract, which I know they won't, because that's the thing. They're going to say, well, he's too expensive to keep, but we're going to get rid of him for a couple nobody players to be named later. That's if they don't get rid of him before the season, because the longer the season goes, it doesn't matter how hot he is. They know he's in the last year of his contract, I don't think, unless he signs an extension with the trade. So I don't know if the MLB contracts are set up that way, like some of the other sports, but I don't know. We'll try to get a little bit more positive here, away from that negativity of the Pittsburgh Pirates, and going to the Pittsburgh Steelers NFL playoff picture. This week it's starting to shape up. So on Thursday, and I hate Thursday games, we talked about that last week, the Steelers look good. And I actually think that Thursday game is going to work out for them. They got it at home. Now, they were a little banged up, so you get the extra week and a couple extra days. So it's kind of like, it's not really a bye week, but you do get to heal up a little bit, and you're comfortably in the lead of the division at 8-2. And that was the most complete Steelers performance I've seen all year. It was dominating. And they were able to do whatever they wanted to do. And maybe it was Tennessee coming in on a tight week, a short week. They had to travel. They were the away team, so that puts an effect on you. So I don't want to get too hyped up over just one Thursday night game, because they still have the Patriots looming. But the Steelers really need that home field advantage for the playoffs. If they get that home field advantage, this could finally be the year when they get New England in the playoffs and are able to beat them. But it's going to be boom or bust, and I still am a little bit worried on Ben. He's not throwing as strong as what he used to do, and I know he's getting older, but it looks like he lost a ton of zip. Even, I think it was one of the first touchdowns, it was kind of just thrown up as a jump ball in the end zone. I think Brown came back and got it, and there were 2 or 3 Titans players where if he had any zip on that ball, it's an easy touchdown instead of a jump ball into the end zone. And in the playoffs, yeah, that might work Thursday night against Tennessee in November. But in the playoffs in January, you're not going to get those. The windows are going to be so tight. That's what scares me. They could be one of those last playoff teams that get the top seed or the second seed and then are bounced in the first round just because your quarterback's your guy. And he's looking like a savvy vet, and I'm high right now on him, but I'm still worried that his deep ball percentage is down, and in the playoffs, that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt because they're going to be able to just squish the zone, kind of like last week whenever they had to do the final 2-minute drill drive to win, and they were able to break like 2 quick slants. Everyone on those routes were running shallow patterns because they knew Ben wasn't going to be able to throw down the field. And in the playoffs, you're not going to have a lead like you had on Thursday. But that's my thoughts on the Steelers. We'll go around. Matt, did you watch any football this weekend? Any NFL stuff?
Well, I did watch that Steelers Thursday night game. And before I get into that, it was announced that the starting right tackle, Marcus Gilbert, is now facing a 4-game suspension for violating the league's substance abuse policy. So to make matters worse and piggybacking off of the issues with Ben and his throwing ability, now you have your starting right tackle who's going to be out the next 4 weeks. That could have an effect on the team going forward because now you're dealing with a team that really hasn't had a pile of injuries through the course of the season, knock on wood. Now they're faced with having a shakeup on the line and dealing with continuity from player to player. They're now having to shuffle some people around, make some moves on the 53-man roster, activating some different people that Now it could cause some issues with pass protection, keeping Ben upright, because he does have that tendency of hanging onto the ball a bit longer than most quarterbacks do, and it could lead to some trouble down the line. The other thing with watching the Thursday night game that I really enjoyed was the camera angle that they were able to present. They took advantage after we had talked about it for so much. They finally showed that a nice angle that's behind the quarterback, so that you can kind of see as he's dropping back, you get the perception of what the quarterback's reading at. And I thought that they didn't do it for a lot of the game, but for a good part of it, there were times where they could really show quarterbacks dropping back. You could see what the coverage was looking like, and able to see, when a quarterback was making a throw, were they missing guys? I thought it was really interesting to see that kind of angle from a coaching perspective, to see at the highest levels, what are those quarterbacks doing or not doing with their passing game and passing protections and things like that to be successful.
Well, actually, I had that in my notes for last week, and we ran out of time. NBC, who I believe that was the first game that they broadcast, they've been putting out feelers for fans to ask them what they thought of that view. And I will say some of the test footage that they had was very shaky. And I read through some of the responses that they got, and it was very negative, because it was almost like a seasick motion, the way some of the plays worked out. So I thought they were going to cut it completely, just because it didn't test well whenever they were asking for feedback on it. But instead, it looked like they pared it back, because I honestly think they were going to show the entire game like that, because they were promoting it as kind of like a real life Madden. So you're in a video game, you can see all the routes, you can see everything. But just because it's so hard to keep up with it for the entire game, at least now, you have to have a great operator. How many guys, unless he's sitting in there practicing with like scrimmages, or there's only so many games a week. So that guy who's operating that Skycam, you really only get 18, 20 weekends maybe. How many weeks is the actual NFL season, counting like the Super Bowl? You only get so many weeks of practice of that, and then you're laid off all summer. So I thought it was a great idea to bring it in late in November. You've been running it now for a few weeks for their other games that they have scheduled, and they're going to roll it out on Thursday nights. I don't know if they're going to go ahead. I haven't seen anything, any feedback based on that camera. I did see a lot of positive things whenever they rolled it out, but I did notice that, and it is something that they are studying, Matt, so you might see more of it in the future. And if it tests well for NBC, it's a copycat league, so every other network is going to go ahead and have some variation of it. But that was their concern. It's tough to get someone who has experience running a Skycam, and if that's your primary camera, it has to be steady, because some of the test footage I saw when they were holding it for the whole plays, because normally they only show it on replay, and they show it, I think, in slow-mo, because you're able to get rid of that seasick feeling. But I thought the guy did a pretty good job. I don't know what his name was, but I did notice that. Rick, what about you? Did you watch any NFL this weekend?
Yeah, I did watch that. I did think that. Then I kept thinking they used that angle a little bit. They didn't use it a lot, but when they had the XFL games, they would use that angle, though, so for certain plays and everything. Now, they also had the guy in the cage and everything that was also traveling around. But it didn't surprise me, and it actually was pretty good. So it's a little something different. So if the NFL wants to do something different, that they succeeded. But some of the other games, I want the New England game and Oakland game, New England versus Oakland. That was just a beatdown. New England had their way and everything, and even the Philadelphia-Dallas game, it proves that they're missing Ezekiel Elliott, and they're a completely different team with one guy missing. So not looking forward kind of to some of these Thursday games here for Thanksgiving, just because of the matchups they're throwing out. But the other thing I wanted to say was I didn't get to see it, but I got to see all the clips. I want to congratulate Nate Peterman on setting an NFL record with 5 picks and 17 minutes in NFL football. Congratulations. I will say this. If John Gruden's looking for a job, the Bills' job may be open too, because I don't know what you're doing. How do you go from being an NFL team that's in the playoff hunt to a team that looks like you have no idea what the heck you're doing?
Well, like I said, Rick, they don't have 5-star hearts there. Why would he want to coach them? You need 5-star hearts.
It's cold at Buffalo too. I wouldn't want to go there either. but I don't get it. You're a winning team. Taylor's doing okay, not great. So we're going to change. We're going to put the 5th round pick in that John Gruden said was the quarterback that was most likely to be ready on day one. And yeah, they put him in like in week 10, and he was doing great. He completed 5 passes to the Chargers. I think they took 2 back in for touchdowns. So congratulations to the Chargers. If you had them on your fantasy team, you probably made big points. But I don't get it. Now you're going to go back to probably Taylor this week. They're probably going to announce it. I don't get it. Why break something that's not working? And especially in the AFC where only 5 teams have a winning record right now, as of right now. Buffalo is now 5-5. They were 5-4. They could have been 6-4 if they would have beat the Chargers, who were 3-6 coming into that game. Disappointed. Just absolutely disappointed. That's just pathetic football. And it's like that's a game people were watching. Just bad.
Yeah, and we talked about it at the beginning of the year. Like the AFC is so top heavy that any of these other teams that can squeak in, if Buffalo were to take advantage of that, they could easily win the first round of their playoff matchup. Because both of your top dogs, Pittsburgh and New England, are most likely going to have that bye. So after that, it's pretty muddied. I think the second best record right now behind those 2 teams, or I guess would be the 3rd best record, is the Jaguars. It's 7-3. So you have them, and then you have a bunch of mediocre, which in the playoffs, I don't think any of those teams would scare me. So
and the Chiefs have lost 4 straight or something, or 3 straight. They're falling. They're on the downward right now.
Yeah, they lost 2 in a row, according to this. They're 6-4 right now. The AFC West is so bad that they're probably going to just win the division. And who knew that the Raiders were going to ball them out like that?
Did you see?
Go ahead, Matt.
Did you see what Rich Eisen tweeted out earlier today?
No,
he had the former Chargers head coach fired as the Broncos OC and replaced by the former Raiders OC, just as the Broncos head to the Raiders, who just fired their defensive coordinator, replaced him with the former Chargers defensive coordinator. It's just everyone in the AFC West just changing positions within the conference. It's all just people just recycled. It goes back to some of those earlier points that we talked about where no one's bringing any fresh ideas. It's stale people bringing a stale product, and it could be why you're ending up with the same product over and over again.
Yeah, I know we mentioned it, and I hate saying that, we talked about this before, but I mean, when you're seeing it and everyone's wondering why the product's been going down, there's been no innovations. We talked about it. Every time you get a college coach to come in, they're laughed out or they don't have time to put their system in whenever they're run out of town in 2 or 3 years. In most cases, I think Pete Carroll's there. He came from college. Other than him, like who? Harbaugh was run out of town. Chip Kelly was run out of town. Saban was run out of town. Steve Spurrier was run out of town. Like once you make that jump, I guess Bill O'Brien, he'll be next. He'll either be run out of town with the Texans or he'll stick around and maybe reach that next level. But whenever you're not given that chance to bring those innovations that are in the college game to the NFL, and then you have they're not recruits, but you have players that are drafted into the NFL that aren't used to these systems, it takes a while for them to get caught up. And them just rotating coaches is ridiculous because all those teams are in the bottom half of the league. Chargers, Raiders, Broncos, it's embarrassing. And then, like, what do you expect as a fan? Could you be happy with that? If the Steelers, that would be like the Steelers hiring the defensive coordinator for the Browns. There would be riots in Pittsburgh if that happened. If you hired anyone from the Browns or the Bengals, even the Ravens have had some success, but in Pittsburgh, you really wouldn't want them to hire coaches from those other teams. So it's weird that it's happening on the other side of the AFC, but I think that's why you're just getting a bunch of mediocre. Keep hiring the same coaches that don't win. And what are you left with? But I'll end it with that on my NFL stuff, and I'll see if you guys have anything else to say. But the NFC, real quick, is a little bit. It's looking like a better league right now, and their playoff picture isn't as clear. You have more teams in it. You have the Seahawks, Lions, Panthers, even the Falcons. They're going to be fighting for those last couple spots. So Cowboys, they're a little bit behind. I don't see them fighting back after that game. It looks like they're done. I mean, they could turn it around because they're only 5-5. They could end up 11-5, 10-6, but I just don't see it. It looks like they don't have heart. And yeah, whenever you're worried about players, he's suspended, he's not suspended, that has to hurt the locker room. I mean, there's no way around it. It has to hurt it. But go around the horn one more time on NFL stuff. Matt, you have anything else to add?
Just a little something that I saw about people claiming that there are flaws in Julio Jones's game. They said he's one of the few players in the league that has no flaws. He absolutely does. It's his ankles. If he can stay over the rest, from week to week, he's a liability. He's always my fantasy keeper, but don't try to act like he's Jesus because he's a toenail away from being shelved for a couple weeks. So slow it down, Atlanta. Keep him safe. Put him in bubble wrap so that he got you for a playoffs.
Yeah, and that was Julio Jones. Matt broke up a little bit if you didn't know who he was talking about. But yeah, they need to get him. They kind of need to. They're to the point where they need to start pressing for wins because that South division is so good that it's a deep division. So they have to get wins wherever they can. Rick, do you have anything else to add this week?
I just want to say kudos to the Eagles and Saints. 8-game winning streaks, 2 teams. I would say Eagles, a lot more people expect it to be good. But the Saints are really coming out of nowhere. I think they're one of the teams that if you improve, you get a couple players around you. They have a 2-headed running monster right now. And I think a lot of people said when they trade away Cooks, they're out. They're not as good. Well, they got 8 wins right now, and they're looking like a good chance of a playoff team. So just want to give a credit to them. And I don't know if either one of you two saw it, but have you seen the Jared Goff cadence calls? Are all like professional wrestlers and just random people. It's like Obama, Ric Flair. I just think it's hilarious. And I think that I don't know if that throws you off or not on the defensive line, but he's just yelling like random stuff. It's like, I don't know what you're doing, but okay. You know, you're getting 7-3, so you got to be doing something right. With what, a 33-year-old head coach or something like that?
Yeah. I didn't know how good he was going to do, but they were high on him, and it's good to have another quarterback coming in, and especially with all the injuries this year. They need to have some new stars start to rear their head, or the league's going to be in trouble with ratings for a while now. But we'll use that wrestling thing to get into college football now. Rivalry week, which your man Ric Flair, Ricky's been tweeting out some hate for Ohio State. And I'll just say right off the bat, I don't think Michigan has a shot. I don't know what our quarterback situation is going to be. It's usually the biggest game of the week for rivalry week, Michigan, Ohio State. For the past 2 years, I want to say that it affected the Big Ten championship game. I don't think it does this year because I'm pretty sure Penn State's in second, or maybe it's Michigan State. But Ohio State has the tiebreakers against both of them. So even if Michigan wins, it's sealed. It's Ohio State versus Wisconsin in the championship game. This game doesn't mean anything. The same problems that reared their head against Penn State happened against Wisconsin. Actually had the lead at halftime. Offensive line, they just haven't gelled. And whenever that happens, it's how many years. I think that's where there's a lot of negativity on the Harbaugh thing right now from, I want to say, extreme fans, not like the normal fans. But they're pretty disappointed in the way the offensive line's been playing and the quarterback play, which is supposed to be his specialty, which you can't give him a knock on that. You have your third-string quarterback in the game. You had the lead. Peters gets injured because of a miscommunication on the line. I don't know if John O'Korn's going to play against Ohio State, but if I was a betting man, I would put all my money on Ohio State. I don't care how big the line is. This is going to be a statement game from Ohio State. They need to win big because they're going to be a 2-loss team trying to get into the playoffs. If they win big on this one and they win big against Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, don't be surprised if they back in to the college football playoff. It's happened with them before because the media loves Urban Meyer. I told you it made great sense. He took a year off of coaching to become friends with everyone in the media. They still show highlights of him on College Game Day because he was on the College Game Day crew for like that year or 2 years when he was in the booth. So everybody loves him. If Ohio State is close, they're going to get in. And you know he's going to be going for style points this weekend. I know it's at Michigan. I'd be shocked if Michigan won. So in terms of big rivalry games, Florida State, who's going to end up with that better record? Right now, they're both garbage. I don't even know Florida who they're going to hire. There's been rumors that it's Chip Kelly, but now that the UCLA position came open, there's been some grumblings that he might not sign. He might want to go and stay on the West Coast. He was the last, I think, the 49ers coach, and he was the previous coach of Oregon where everyone knows him from. So he's more of a West Coast guy. He knows that's where he can get the recruits from. So don't be surprised now if he passes over Florida and stays with UCLA. Lower expectations, like he had at Oregon. He can put his system in. People won't be mad. Florida, they're going to be hungry for win at all costs. They just fired McElwain in 3 years. He wasn't given the time. Like, I'm sorry, if you're a Florida fan, what should have happened was they should have made him fire Nussmeier like Alabama and Michigan both did. Fire your offensive coordinator. You're supposed to be the offensive guru, and you can't score points. Florida should have forced him to do something, give him a little bit more time, because now I think they're going to have trouble finding a coach who wants to step into that pressure, especially now that it looks like Miami might be back. And Florida State's not going to stay down for long either. But Matt, what are your thoughts on that game this week? I know it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but...
There's a lot riding on this because there's the bowl streak that they have to pretty much win out at this point to get themselves bowl eligible to continue the nation's longest bowl streak. There's also just the fact that it's Florida, and I hate them, and they need to continue to lose because they're garbage. The issues with them have been stemming over the last couple of years having a lack of an offense. One of the things that with the media hype of a lot of this, I don't know how they can put, and I'm not saying that Florida State's going to be a barn burner. It's probably going to be a close game because of the quarterback issues and things that we've had, plus Florida having no offense. It's probably going to be a sloppy game. But I don't see how ESPN's going to try to spin Michigan, Ohio State into a game that's bigger than what it. You're right. It should be an Ohio State blowout, but I don't see Ohio State as the same team that they were a couple years ago. For whatever reason, they just don't seem to have that extra gear to be able to put teams away. So for as much as I want to think that it probably should be a blowout, I think it's more along the lines going to end up being like a 20-17, 20-14 type game, that it's going to be more of a heavyweight boxing type match where you're going to have Don Brown's defense matching up against Urban Meyer's offense, and they're going to they might get a couple breaks here and there, but it's going to pretty much come down to who has the ball last late in the game that'll end up being the deciding factor in that game.
I would hope that happens, but from what I've seen at Penn State and what I've seen at Wisconsin, when you have an offense that it doesn't matter, I expect the game to be close going into halftime. I think it's always been close the past couple of years, except for even that year they had Ezekiel Elliott ran away with the game 2 years ago or 3 years ago. What's been happening is Michigan is playing close. They get into the third quarter. They go through 3 or 4 series in a row of 3 and outs. And right then, the defense breaks. They get tired, and then it's game over. Because if the offense can't keep them off the field, the defense is on the field, they don't have the depth. I think it's pretty clear. People said it before the season. What classes would they be? 13, 14, 15 maybe. Those classes were very small because Brady Hoke was on his way out. So they only took like 12 kids. Harbaugh then was hired late because everyone was going to say he was going to stay in the NFL. So Michigan makes a late hire. He has a very small class his first year. Those two classes should be the contributing juniors and seniors, and they're just not there. So almost everyone that's playing is freshman and sophomore. So most predicted 8-4 this year. I think a lot of the grumbling's coming because that fourth loss ended up being to Michigan State instead of Florida like most people predicted. Now, looking at how the season turned out, most people would expect that Florida to be a win because of how bad they've been. And I think most people now, just in hindsight, would expect them to win the Michigan State game. But it was a monsoon, and you're playing your third-string quarterback. So at that point, just because you're playing with so many injuries, I just don't think it's going to be close. The same thing is going to happen. Second half, they're going to get tired, and I know they're going to play hard. Can't knock them for that, but it's not going to happen. Now, I did say I was going to bring up Penn State. Penn State bills himself as being unrivaled. And I think this is where Penn State should really try to do something because I think it hurts them down the line. Right now, they don't have, let's say they were in a position where they can, right now they're trying to play for a BCS bowl game. This is rivalry week. This is their last shot to make a good impression. And they don't have a game. They play what, Maryland? I think that's who they play.
Away.
Yeah, Maryland. Is that going to help your resume? No. And they bill themselves as unrivaled. They used to have a last week matchup against Michigan State. But Michigan State didn't want anything to do with them because Penn State was playing it off like they weren't a rival, even though Michigan State has been better than Penn State for the past 8 to 10 years. Michigan State's been the second best team in the Big Ten East. So you have a team that Penn State was trying to brush off, and now you're in a scenario where Penn State has nobody to play, and the last couple weeks of their schedule is pretty weak. So there's no way they can play themselves into a better bowl game. They're kind of in wait-and-see mode. What the worst-case scenario would be if they lose this game. They lose this game, they're going to be shoved down that bowl pecking order. And it's going to go down hard. So Penn State really has to play. It's a lose-lose for them. What are your thoughts on that, Rick?
I think they have to play and blow them out. I mean, you got to run up the score. You got at least right now they are getting favored by 22 in Vegas. I would say you got to win by more. You got to win by 4 touchdowns if possible. But there are some weird things that can help them out. If Alabama's playing Auburn, if Alabama wins big, that could knock Auburn down a little bit. So, I mean, that would be one. I see Ohio State winning and beating Michigan. Ohio State has a really good team. I'm going to give them credit. Meyer's one of the best coaches in college football. Definitely in the top 5. You got to give them the credit. And I think that if they win big, that puts them up. So, I mean, it just depends. And, I mean, I'm looking at some of these games. Georgia plays Georgia Tech. Wisconsin goes against Minnesota. Minnesota's not going to really put up much of a challenge. I mean, Oklahoma goes against West Virginia, which I don't know. That's definitely not a rivalry. But they're favored by 22 because they're at home. I mean, there's just so many, non-factor games, but there are so many good ones. I mean, Miami's playing Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, but they're favored by 13.5 right now, at least. So, I mean, I see a lot of teams standing still because they're playing weak opponents. So it's a lot of teams that are playing weak opponents or opponents you thought were going to be better at the beginning of the year just didn't, so wait and see, I guess. But I don't see a lot of changing, not unless there's major upsets or major blowouts. It has to be one or the other. So it has to be the two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, Miami, they're suffering the same thing. They're not playing anyone. They have no rival. Whenever they do play Florida State, that's their main rival. But they should have pushed the ACC to try to make that Notre Dame game an annual game in one of the 5. Like, if I was Miami, that's what I would really push them to do because they need a non-conference opponent. Since they're in that other weird division in the ACC, it always hurts them because no one takes them serious. You see it right now in the standings. Till they beat Notre Dame the way they did, they were the lowest undefeated team, I think. Maybe Wisconsin was behind them. And I'm not counting UCF in these, but Miami right there, they really didn't have any way to prove themselves because they don't have a rival outside of Florida State, and that's one tough game a year. When your division is Virginia Tech, who's average, and North Carolina, who's garbage, and Duke, who's decent, and Syracuse and Pitt or whoever else is in that division. I don't think Syracuse is actually.
But it's this year. This year those teams are down. You look at Virginia Tech has been competitive. Some of the teams in that division have been relatively competitive in the recent years. I mean, it's hurt Miami this year because there have been so many teams that are on a downswing that there's a reason that they haven't won the ACC or been in contention for the ACC championship since joining the ACC. You know, there's the Georgia Tech teams that they don't get a lot of respect because of them running the triple option scheme, but that will win the Coastal a handful of years, and some other things that they have to at least win the Coastal before people take them seriously. And I think if you take the same Miami team with their schedule and you put them in the Big Ten with that same record, they're going to be much higher in your rankings because of that bias.
Well, I don't know if it's really a bias, because if you go back the way, you're saying Virginia Tech's been good. They've been pretty awful. Every time they've represented the ACC, they're 1-5 in BCS or higher bowl games. Their winning percentage in those games is 167. That's garbage. You can't say that's a top-level team whenever you have the rep from that Coastal division gets their ass kicked every year in their bowl game. No one's going to take them serious. So that's where the bias comes from. Whenever you have teams from the Big Ten, people knock the West, but you have Iowa crushing Georgia Tech in the Orange Bowl a few years ago. You have Wisconsin winning the Rose Bowl. You have these teams from outside of that division winning big bowl games. And then you have the ACC. It just hasn't happened outside of Florida State and Clemson. So you can go through the numbers. And Miami, they won. But when they won, they were in the Big East. And that's where I think they should try to pull back in that Notre Dame rivalry. You saw ESPN pushing it. They were all over it. And it helped them out. They got the bump they needed. They just don't have that on a year-by-year basis. And I think as Miami, that's what they should be trying to do. Because outside of that, you're in a weak division. I honestly think the ACC should just go north and south like the Big Ten did and say, all right, Virginia Tech, now's your chance. If you win, at least if you're going to get to the ACC championship game, have your loss, your 1-5 record be in the ACC championship game instead of representing them because maybe some fluke Miami, they have the crossover game with Florida State. Who does Virginia Tech have as a crossover? It's nowhere near the caliber of Florida State. So that's the one thing that I think would help the ACC out, because it's helped the Big Ten. And right now the SEC is kind of the same way with the SEC West, which I think Rick mentioned. That is the biggest rivalry game this week, Alabama and Auburn. I think most people expect Alabama to win. Auburn's been hot and cold. They did lose to Clemson. So whenever you have that, that's where you could get someone arguing, if Auburn wins this game, you might get some pushback saying that the ACC needs two teams in if Clemson does in fact win the ACC. You're going to get some people saying that Miami should be in as well, just because of that Clemson over Auburn. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Alabama is going to win convincingly, and then they're going to have that Georgia showdown that they want. The other big game that I want to mention for my last single this week, Washington and Washington State. Now, both teams are 9-2. This is going to decide the Pac-12 North. And then the winner of that's going to play USC, and it's going to be, I don't think USC plays this week, maybe. So I think it's going to be a 2-loss team against 2-loss team in the championship. So the Pac-12 champion is going to be 2 losses no matter what. Will that put them ahead of potentially an Ohio State, which is also going to have 2 losses? Who's going to be the highest 2-loss champion? And it could also include Auburn, because you're going to get to the point where you're going to see a 2-loss champion make the playoffs. Is it going to be this year? It depends how things get shaken down. Because if Miami beats Clemson, that knocks Clemson out. The ACC only has one team close. The SEC, if Alabama knocks out Auburn And then Georgia, you're looking at Oklahoma and Ohio State and the Pac-12 winner against Notre Dame for those last couple spots. So potentially you could get a 2-loss champion this year. I know ESPN's been pushing all that stuff out, but something interesting to watch. But that's my game. If you're not going to watch Alabama-Auburn, I would recommend watching the Apple Cup, Washington versus Washington State. Both teams are undefeated at home this year, and the Apple Cup is let me double check, it is in Washington. So will they get that first loss at home, or are they going to keep and stay undefeated at home overall and have the Huskies go back to the Pac-12 championship? But that's it for my thoughts on college football. We'll go around again. Matt, do you have anything else to add this week?
I actually, with all the injuries that have been going on in Alabama, I won't be surprised if Auburn pulls the upset up. I was thinking about this morning. If Auburn were to win, I know that a lot of people are still going to say, well, Alabama is one of arguably the top 4 teams in the country. They should still have a seat at the table because of Nick Saban. And my answer to that is, if they can't beat Auburn, I don't see a way that you allow them back in, because at that point it would be, I believe, a rematch of Auburn-Georgia for the SEC championship. So they're not going to be the SEC champion, neither 1 or 2. So I don't see how you can reasonably give them a seat at the table, even though arguably they are probably one of the top 4 teams based on the way Saban prepares them. I think if they can't pull the win off, it's really going to put them in a tough spot.
Well, I think looking at that, that's a good point, because I don't think they really have any big wins. They play LSU and Mississippi State, but those are both bottom of the top 25 type wins. And so this Auburn win,
and one of the
is there a chance for a signature win that other teams have that they don't? But go ahead.
The other thing with this, that they get knocked around because as a conference, they have not had a lot of success in out-of-conference bowl games and other big game matchups. But I think the team that is deserving to have 2 teams in this year is actually the Big 12. I think think of what you want of Baker Mayfield and his off-the-field antics, but Oklahoma's playing very good football and are probably deserving of a spot. And I think TCU had some slip-ups earlier in the year, but as a conference and as a whole, the Big 12 has been playing very good football and are showing they're not knocking each other out by the competitiveness of the league. But I'm starting to think that maybe there's something to the competitiveness of the Big 12, that maybe they're the conference that if you're getting 2 teams in, they should be the one to have it. It'll never happen. They'll be lucky to get 1 team in because of the Power 5. They're scraping the bottom 2. It's between them and the Pac-12 of who's the lessest of the 5. But I think that they're trying to take the steps in the right direction, but they're knocking each other out so often that I don't see a way that they're going to get 2 teams in, if 1.
That's a good point. And with that, it happened a few years ago where you saw, I think it's kind of like the inept leadership that they have in the conference. Because if you remember that year, they had Baylor and TCU both with 1 loss. The committee asked them, they said, hey, who is your champion? And their commissioner was kind of like, you guys decide. Because they were trying to sneak both teams in. And I think that really rubbed the committee the wrong way. And you really can't do that the first year of the playoffs. You can't snub your nose at them. Because a lot of people, you can't forget, the Big 12 was running commercials that year of 1 true champion. Because they were saying that they were the only team that, or the only conference that had all their teams play each other. And then whenever they get into a tie situation, which I can't remember which way it was, if Baylor beat TCU for the 1 loss or TCU beat Baylor. But there was one of those teams that should have been the champion, and the Big 12 commissioner didn't name that champion. And so they kind of scrapped them. Now you have another overreaction by the Big 12 where TCU loses to Oklahoma. And I think it was a 14-point loss or something. That's close for the Big 12 since they have huge scores there. But now they have to play Oklahoma again. So if TCU beats Oklahoma this time, you're kind of knocking your own conference out because you play that round robin schedule. You don't need that 13th data point. They didn't need it the first time. The commissioner just needed to step up and said, no, this is our champion. Put them in the game. they deserve to be in the playoffs, and then Ohio State never jumps them. They never do. And so now you wouldn't have this scenario. I think the thing that hurts the Big 12 is no one really schedules outside for non-conference. Yeah, they lose the non-conference games, but they're playing the mid-tier teams, and that's what hurts them. They're playing, Iowa State's playing Iowa, which is a loss pretty much throughout most of history for Iowa State. So when Iowa State loses to Iowa, and Iowa's a half-decent team this year, that's it. They're not a great team. They're not the undefeated Iowa from a few years ago. So now that loss looks bad to every team that loses to Iowa State. No one else schedules it like out of non-conference like they don't. West Virginia played Virginia Tech at the beginning of the year, which was a quality loss for them. But it doesn't really tell much. Oklahoma's the only team. They went on the road. They played Florida State. They've been playing Ohio State the past 2 years. I want to say they're going to Michigan. I think Texas is also going to Michigan in 2020 or 2022 or something like that. Texas and them, Oklahoma, those are the only two teams that schedule top teams outside of their conference. And these other teams don't do that. And then they wonder why their strength of schedule is so low. Yeah, the points might be higher in the computers because they play in a tough conference, but there's no way to show it. And I don't want them to add other members, to be honest. That's just going to water down the league. And then they're still not going to get in anyway. Unless Texas is winning the league, which there was a weird thing, and I was trying to check on this while you were talking. Texas right now is 5-3, and TCU is what? They play a 9 games conference schedule. I think there's a way. Let me double check this real quick. But I think there's a way. TCU plays Baylor. So if TCU loses to Baylor, you could potentially have 4 teams or more. I don't know who plays who this last week, but 3 or 4 teams that are all tied with 3 losses. I don't know what their tiebreaker scenario is, but that sounds awful. So I guarantee they're going to be praying for TCU to beat Baylor. I know Baylor's like awful, but could you imagine how big of a headache that would be for the Big 12? Hey, this is our first year with the conference championship game. It's going to be Oklahoma versus one of these guys. And it'll go down to like, what was that movie? Was it Friday Night Lights or whatever? They flipped the coin to get in the playoffs, or maybe it was Remember the Titans. I don't remember. Some high school football movie, like that's how they did high school tiebreakers. I could see that happening with the Big 12, and that would just be hilarious. But Rick, you have anything else to add?
I won't be around on Saturday, so I won't get to watch football this weekend. So I'm going to pick my game to watch will be the South Florida UCF game. For the sheer fact is, if UCF wins, they have the undefeated record still going. No, I do not think this puts them in the top 4, but it could put them in the top 10 or top 12. I'll say definitely top 12 if they win. So, but that's what I'm watching because I think it'll be one of those games that's going to be back and forth. There's going to be lots of scoring, and I think it's going to be one of those days. I think if I have my date right, it is actually going to be a Thanksgiving Day game, or it's going to be a Friday game. But I think it's going to be one of those games where it's going to be a good game to watch, and it's going to be 2 teams that are fighting, especially because South Florida's 9-1. They're still trying to play to get into the top 25. So I think it's going to be good both ways that way.
Yeah, and I'll end it on that unless you guys have any other final thoughts. I'll let you guys go one more time. But right there, I think whenever you're looking at UCF, I think that's going to be one of the knocks on this playoff format. I don't see a reason why UCF shouldn't be included. They went ahead and scheduled Maryland. At the beginning of the year, that looked like that could be a quality win because Maryland had just beaten Texas. So then you have UCF, that's their non-conference schedule. They really can't do anything outside of them because a lot of Power 5 teams don't want to play them. And they're trying. They were just at Michigan last year. I think Michigan beat them last year or 2 years ago. So they're trying to play bigger teams. Teams just don't want anything to do with UCF because they see what's happening. It's the largest school in the state of Florida. So you're having all of those students being able to get in there and put together a quality football team. So now you're looking at a school that's kind of a sleeping giant that I could see the Big 12 adding them down the line. The problem is they'd be on an island by themselves, and I don't know if that would help them. But with the playoffs, I definitely think they should expand to at least 8 and do conference champions and possibly one Power 5 team. or one, non-Power 5 team or whatever they're called. Just because if you're that number 1 seed and you're not going to get a bye. Some people were saying make it 6 and give a team a bye. That's garbage. Let them play a non-Power 5. Let Alabama play UCF if you think they're the weakest. How many do you think they would rather play? Let's say if that happened this year. Do you think UCF would rather play or Alabama would rather play UCF undefeated or potentially that other Power 5 7 seed or whoever they would be? Let it be like a Penn State or whoever. Because sometimes maybe they would. You have a team or a year like this, I'm looking at the standings right now, and down the line, like they could either play, Alabama could play Notre Dame with 2 losses. That would be one of the last teams to get in. Maybe Penn State. You have the Pac-12 champion. Maybe they think UCF's tougher. I think you should let them pick. Let them pick who they want to play, and then you'll see some real interesting matchups. But that's it for me this week. I'll let you guys go. Anything else to add? We'll start with you, Rick.
Nothing much except for baseball winter meetings are starting in 2 weeks. Hockey season's gearing up. College basketball's starting here right now. I mean, with all the tournament play and everything, so it's a good time in sports with a lot of things happening. Definitely that, and that's it. And happy Thanksgiving.
Matt, what about you?
I had an interesting fact in the Noles 77-6 blowout of Delaware State. Guess what? We're going to take these wins when we can get them. But they actually had a player score a touchdown who was an actual Seminole Indian. And it was the first time that a true Seminole scored a touchdown. So they were giving that touchdown reception. They were presenting that ball to the actual tribe, which I thought was pretty cool. And glad to actually know going in we should destroy them. We did, and hopefully it's something to build on so that we can do it to Florida and to ULM so that we can get bowl eligible.
All right, well, that's it for this week. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook. Make sure you like our page. We do our videos live on Facebook if you're just a podcast subscriber. Leave us a review. Tell your friends. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher. I think we're on Google Play, TuneIn, and a bunch of other places. So that's been the Southbound Sports Show. Have a good week, everybody.